Well, today's project is a bookshelf, only we're not going to be using lumber like this. We're going to be using lumber like this. So let's imagine a bookshelf. And we'll say 6 feet tall by 1 foot deep and 3 feet across. And we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shelves. Okay. Now, actually, our bookshelf is going to be 1 in 12 or 1/12 scale. It's actually for my daughter's dollhouse. So that's a very convenient scale because all we really need to do is cross out feet and put inches here. Right? 6 feet. 6 times 12 is 72 inches tall. Divided by 12 brings us back to 6 inches. Okay? So there's the math. So let's cut out some parts. We've got 2 sides, a top, a bottom, a back, and the shelves, and some little trim pieces for the bottom. So let me get a fresh blade in my knife, and let's get busy and do some cutting. My hands aren't too shaky right now, so I guess I haven't had enough coffee. Okay, so imagine our bookshelf, and this is going to be the side panel, and we want it to look like that. We don't want it to look like that from the side where you can see the back. So that means that our shelves are going to have to be not as wide as the sides by the thickness of this material. So let's mark that out and get a measurement for that. Okay, now we can make some shelves out of these 3 pieces. Again, they're narrower than the sides by the thickness of the back. So let's cut out 1 for the bottom, 1, 2, 3 shelves. But instead of using these for the top, I think I'm going to make the top a little bit proud of the sides and the front. And that I will cut out of this extra piece that I have here. But first, let's trim for these shelves. Here we have our 2 sides, back. I've got 3 shelves, a bottom, and a top. And maybe later we'll cut some trim for the bottom. We'll just see. I'm going to do a little sanding on the edges, and then we'll be ready for glue up. So if this is the bottom of our shelf here, I came up the thickness of this ruler, which is about 1/2 inch, and then spaced for the thickness of each shelf. In each shelf, then I measured 1 1/4 inches, plus the thickness of the material, 1 1/4 inches, 1 1/4 inches. And then there's a little left over at the top, and that will allow me to drop down with a little piece of trim and keep the spaces for the shelves mostly the same. So here you can see I'm using some CA, some kicker, and a little block of wood that I'm using to hold these shelves straight as I glue them to the back. And then I'll come back and do the sides. All right, and now for the sides. Okay, now it's time to put the top on. You may be able to hear a small fan that I've got. Let me swing the camera around here. For some reason, in the last year or so, a couple of years maybe, the glue fumes and things like that make me sick after a while. So I got this little fan to help disperse some of the fumes. Okay, so let's glue this top on, and then we can do some final sanding and then see about some trim on the bottom. Okay, before we go any further, I've mixed up some epoxy. And this structure is going to be so light that it needs a little bit of help. So we're going to put some weights in the bottom of it before we go any farther. So let's epoxy in some of these metal nuts here. And it will give this some much needed stability. I guess I can turn the fan off now. Okay, let's let that dry, and then we got to work on this trim piece that goes on the bottom and see if we want to put one on the top. Okay, well, I've got the piece on the bottom and a little bit of trim on the top, and of course we've got our weights on the bottom. So if this is against the wall on the dollhouse, it will not have a tendency to fall forward. Well, what's a bookshelf without books, right? So we have to have a few selections to read. I'm going to pick a few that my daughter and I have read together or have listened to books on tape together. If we take road trips together, we always have some things to listen to in the truck. So basically, if you can find an image or take it with your camera of the whole cover, so we have the front and the back and the spine, and then you can fit it to size, print it out, and then slightly undersized, make yourself a little block that will represent the pages. And then once I get them all cut out, I'll show you what I do to simulate the paper. Right here you can see, I age it just a little bit so it's not pure white. So let's mix up a little bit of white, but let's tone it down a little bit with a little bit of yellow, just so it's not so bright white. Because after all, these books are well read and well thumbed through. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put a few drops. Now this is sort of you could make something like this yourself. It's kind of a weathering solution, light gray wash. You could use India ink and alcohol, for example, as a mixture. Basically, you want a really watered down, super watered down gray. And that is just going to put a tiny bit of grime on the edges of these pages, just so they're not super perfect looking. Just take the edge off that paint. Well, there are books, so we got a few books for our bookshelf. And now it's time to think about painting. And I'm going to use a watered down espresso brown. A couple of little sample patches here. And I want to have it, I'm going to use acrylics, but I want to have it look a little bit more like a stain. And then I probably will spray a little lacquer on it to seal it up. So let's get some painting going. Okay, that's a couple of coats of brown. So I think what I'm going to do now is seal it with some lacquer. And I think it's done, ready to give to my daughter for her dollhouse. And we have a few books for the shelves as well. Well, I had a lot of fun making this, and I hope it was fun for you to watch. So, until our next project, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.